and non-members, and I know some people are still joining us. So thank you for joining us today. So our chapter, like many other nonprofits throughout the country, rely on funding, and the biggest source is through our memberships. So if you aren't already a member, please consider joining our chapter. And if you are already a member, don't forget to renew. So there is a new process. You need to make sure that you engage with that with our PayPal account. So don't forget to do that. So the goal of our coffee breaks are really to provide an opportunity for our community to engage in conversations over hot cups of coffee. Okay, and a short 30-minute break. So we like to start promptly on time to get things going. So our theme for today's conversation is net energy positive mixed income housing, wonderful living spaces that are affordable and sustainable. So today we have with us, and I'd like to introduce Wyly Brown. He's an assistant professor of Sam Fox School, Washington University in St. Louis. Wyly is a founding partner of Leupold Brown Goldbach Architect, and the partner responsible, sorry, I goofed that
up. That's okay. It's Architekten. You can say Albago Architekten is the short.
Ah, okay. Responsible for the project conducted in North America, Wyly holds a Bachelor in Arts and Monuments through the reconstruction of full-scale functional objects, often using historical accurate methods. Past projects include the reconstruction of Finnish reindeer-pulled sledges, Egyptian obelisks, British siege engines, and medieval man-powered cranes. Those are mouthfuls. Those are super interesting. So before we get started, I just want to give everyone a little bit of guidelines. I know that we're really familiar with everything, but just to kind of lay the land, the option to click the grid view in the upper right-hand corner to see all of the callers is available to you. The chat function is accessible in the bottom. Feel free to use that throughout. Please try to be respectful of others and allow others to join in the conversation. Be mindful of not jumping over anyone speaking, but you know what, feel free to talk without really being called upon. However, if you have something that you really want to get out and you want to say but not interrupt, just use one of those reactions like a little wave at the bottom, and I'll note that and try to get back to you so that you have an opportunity to still engage in the conversation. And then finally, try to keep yourself muted unless speaking to avoid background noise. And then like me, don't forget to unmute yourself when you're trying to talk. So thank you so much, and Wyly, take it away.
All right, let me see if I can get this to work properly here. Okay, do you guys see the full screen of the presentation?
Yes.
Okay, good. So, good morning, everyone. Ramadan Kareem for those who observe the holiday. Quick intro, Brandon just gave a quick intro. Here's a quick intro of myself as well. I'm founding partner of Albago Architects, or the German founding name is Architekten. We have offices in Munich where we started, and in Boston. Here's our team that's comprises of actually people from 10 different countries, or maybe more, maybe 11. And here's our Boston office that I'm in charge of that basically runs the US operations. And we design basically the whole range of things from housing, which we'll talk about today. My partners and I have designed stadiums, supermarkets, youth centers, a whole range of different things. But our main fundamental foundations of design are kind of the trifecta of environmental sustainability, social responsibility, and financial feasibility. So we really have this background of like practical innovation and trying to take complex situations and create simple designs. So, some examples are, we really think about the flow of inside and outside and the access of inside space with outside space. So this is a very low energy supermarket that we built that actually costs less to build than a conventional box building and uses less energy every year. Here's a youth center we designed where we really have a lot of focus on social interaction and creating spaces in a community theater. And also, particularly in the Boston area, I've been working on activating open spaces. This was a student design build project that I worked with local youth build and local community leaders, a nonprofit called Boston Food Forest. And we built a community greenhouse on open vacant space in the city of Boston. So something that I like to do when I'm going to talk about a topic is I love to first just Google do a Google image search of the topic. So I started to see kind of what's the popular view of this topic. So I put in energy positive housing. And it's kind of funny, you see these like, lots of steep roofs or, some wood or very modern buildings, so this is kind of, it's obviously some solar panels. So this is kind of the popular view of energy positive housing. And then I kind of looked up, okay, what if we look at sustainable housing? You look at it, you see, okay, now we have some weird domey structures and some earth ships and a lot of grass and plants growing all of it. Okay, so that means, sustainable buildings mean you grow stuff on it, all right? Well, so then I looked up mixed income housing, and this is where it got really interesting. We're suddenly, mixed income is huge urban housing blocks for the most part, ranging from some attractive, some really hideous. And then, okay, a couple little kind of two-story little pieces in here, but for the most part, yeah, it looks like mixed income is some huge, huge blocks. And so then I threw in there, what if we just look at housing? And here's where it got really interesting. If you type in housing, basically that's affordable housing. And now we're not even looking at buildings, we're looking at graphics or images of buildings. And so this is, this is interesting to think about, what are we actually talking about here? So, what is housing? And we have all sorts of different types of housing we can talk about. We talk about energy positive housing or split level housing or suburban housing or alpine housing or but the problem is that usually when we talk about housing, we're talking about the modifiers. And we focus on, energy positive housing, a lot of solar panels and low energy. And what we forget to talk about is the housing. We lose the fact that, what is housing really? Is housing a building? Is housing a technical achievement? Is housing, and so then, here's where I'm gonna, throw my cards on the table. I think housing is where people relax together. It's about the people. Housing is where people celebrate together. Housing is where people hang out together. And you'd be amazed at how difficult it is to do an internet search and find candid pictures that aren't staged of any of these things, because we don't take pictures of what we do every day in our home. These are the things that, it's like this invisible, there's no real good X-ray vision of what actually goes inside the house, so we only have our own experience. But this is what architects are faced to do, is like, how do you actually make quality living spaces for people? Right, so here's the case study that I want to throw out there. This is it's a Colonial Ave in Boston, and rather than calling it affordable, as I know the title lecture was energy positive mixed income, I'd rather call it a wonderful home that is energy positive and affordable. So the impetus of this project was the Boston Planning and Development Agency put out what they call the E+ competition for a double lot that they're basically giving away to a developer who can come up with an energy positive and 25% affordable design for 4 units in Dorchester, Boston. So for those of you who know Boston, here's the center of Boston. Here's Dorchester, which is historically a redlined, underserved neighborhood. But now, of course, real estate prices in Boston are going through the roof all over the place. So it's slowly gentrifying, or not so slowly gentrifying. And the city of Boston is finally trying to, put some stoppers to the over speed of development. And here's the site. And you can see the site is flanked by 2 of these classic, iconic Boston triple deckers, which are really, very iconic to Boston. You see the street, you see all these triple high buildings. Okay, these have gable roofs, but the triple decker is the ones on the right here. And the main features of these type of buildings are they have flat roofs, they have big front porches where people interact with the street, they have bay windows so that people can see down the street from the inside, and they have exposed basements. So there's a possibility of building out the basement as an additional space. So I went to the neighborhood and I was walking around, and one thing I noticed, you can see here, this is actually a Google shot, it's not my shot from walking around. People leave a lot of furniture on their front porches. You can see that from Google. When I was walking there, a lot of people sit on their porches and will wave to you and chat with you. It's a really friendly neighborhood where people actually sit there pretty much any time of day that I walked around. You'd find somebody playing checkers or playing cards. And then the backyards were even more active. You always hear some like bumping music, and you smell some people grilling. And you see here, this is even just a Google shot, these 3 women that are in the backyard hanging out. So this very active use of the open spaces. So, okay, we're thinking, okay, how could we incorporate that into a design? So we started out by coming up with this, basically what we call a double duplex. We put 2 double high units on top of one another and really tried to emphasize, taking advantage of the fact that the basement's half buried. and really try to emphasize this idea of access to the outside, from inside to outside, access to the street, access to the green garden and the yard space in between. And then, of course, the double high gives an aspect of you now have this kind of more grand feeling in the space, and it helps control some natural ventilation. And so then we faced all the living spaces toward the garden, toward the green, and toward the sun as well, toward the south. You know, this is, at the end of the day, this is energy positive, so we have to think about energy. And we opened up this welcoming facade toward the street that referenced the existing buildings, but was clearly something new. But it had both. It had a little bit of both in there. And the city, you know, fell in love with it. We won the competition, and you know, went forward. And then, you know, of course, at the same time, we had to think of like, how do we actually save energy? Well, now we already kind of got the qualities of life in there. So now we're going to throw some energy saving things on there. And of course, this is where you get your big list of technicals. But the main ways you save energy are you make a tight building envelope, you make sure you're using very low energy appliances, and then you monitor your energy use. And so then, you know, here's a whole list of it, and we can go over that. But if people are interested, you can ask about it. I want to kind of get through the main points here. But those are kind of the big clumps. But then, of course, people are like, oh, but this sounds expensive. Remember, the third block is that financial feasibility. And so how do you make this affordable? Well, not affordable in housing, but how do you make it cost effective? And it's really through optimized construction. We can, you know, we actually initially proposed this as a prefabbed or a modular system, but the city of Boston would not allow that because they wanted local labor. So okay, we can play. And so we used basically typical conventional stick framing, but we optimized it using advanced framing systems, which I'm sure many of you are familiar with, where basically a double stud staggered wall on a 2x10. So a double stud 2x4 wall with on a 2x10 sill plate can get you up to R40 insulation, but actually costs less to build than a standard 2x6 wall. So you can actually, by making a more effective system, it can cost less. Another thing that's really key is keep a compact building form. We don't have a lot of dormers. We don't have a lot of bump outs. We have a few little overhangs and some bump ins, but keeps it simple to insulate, keeps it simple to construct. All wood construction, no I-beams, no, you know, keep it simple, low key, and really control where all your utilities are going to have to rope through. So you use, you know, plywood, what do you call them? I-joists. So you can, if you need to run things through, you can drill through them really easily. And another one is really, this is the key, is really economic and durable finishes. You can still create great texture and great feeling with, you know, relatively conventional materials that are just placed cleverly. You don't need to, you know, put on very expensive materials and do all your terracottas and all, you know, it can actually be pretty reduced. So we actually ended up building this building at the same, with the solar array, at the same cost as conventional construction in Boston, $220 a square foot. Then that was including the landscape. And here, then we still got our dynamic double high spaces with this connection between inside and outside. This is an affordable unit, classically affordable, that I'm showing a photograph of. Natural light and openness. You know, you have this open kitchen, open dining where you're getting a lot of light and connection to outside, this real flow from inside to outside with the balconies and with the spaces. These kind of nice inviting balconies that invite you to go out, invite you to wave at your neighbors and chat with them, you know, which was people were doing anyway. And then really welcoming toward the street. And so, you know, really making it kind of a fun thing. And what was funny is when people would drive by during construction, as soon as we put up these colored balconies, people would stop and honk and be like, we love this house. The community really responded to the fact that there was some fun in the housing, that some activity, something new that was fresh but still fit in. So the kind of what I wanted to leave you with is, you know, we need to think of, you know, when we think of housing, we need to start with housing. And we, you know, let's create quality living spaces. Let's start with considering the connection to the local neighborhood. Let's think about this access from inside to outside. You know, these are what we need to talk about no matter what we're talking about regarding housing. You know, we need to not think about just the modifier, because yeah, once we get those things in place, the technical stuff, the low energy, the cost effective, the affordable, the modifiers, we can get that done too. But the other stuff is really what we need to make happen. Thank you. And I'd love to open this up to a discussion. And welcome any questions.
Yes, this is great. Thank you. Wyly, feel free to unmute yourselves or type something into the chat and we can speak up for you if you'd like as well.
So I have several questions, Wyly. This is Nancy Rodney. One, is that vinyl siding or is it some sort of a hardboard siding? What is the siding material? Two, what happens in Boston to the recessed garden in the winter? Do you worry about snow buildup and water, et cetera? And my last question is, where do they park? Is there parking on the side or is it typically, urban parking on the street? Thanks.
Yeah, great questions, getting right down to the nitty gritty. Let me see if I can, first of all, the question about the siding. It's hardy board, cement fiber board. So it goes up there, it's impregnated. You don't need to paint it, low maintenance, very durable, fairly low cost. I'm trying to go to the plan. Parking was actually a requirement. We had to have one parking place per unit, but because of the way, typically if you have to park a car behind a car, it's only considered a half parking spot. But we were able to set up the driveway that the car could physically pass by one another, although code would dictate that this is actually, would be 3 parking space, like 1, 2, this would be a full parking space, this would be a full parking space, this would be a half and a half. But the zoning department allowed us, because you could, the way we built it, it is actually possible to drive in and out, that this was considered 4 parking spaces. So it was a tight lot, and that was one of the big zoning concerns is the parking. So we were able to get a spot for per unit in the building. I'm sorry, I forgot your third question.
Your recessed courtyard in the front or in the back, where don't you have a below?
There's one in the front and in the back, actually.
Okay.
The one in the front is underneath the existing porch. It's the smaller one. And it gives an extra access to a bedroom on the, minus half level that could be used as kind of like an Airbnb or a rental, quick access. That it's not in this plan. I don't have that particular plan open. The other one here, snow is a bit of an issue, but because it's a sliding door and the way the overhangs work, it was determined that the snow would pile up and away from the building and not cause pressure to the door itself. So it hasn't been itself to be a problem at all.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, I'd like to ask Wyly a question. First of all, I'm very impressed by the quality of detailing in the end on, as you say, a tight budget. I think it's really well resolved. I'm curious, you mentioned modular construction as like a starting point, which didn't really work out. I'm personally involved with housing, and modular construction is something that we're kind of trying to implement here, but there's quite a lot of kind of resistance from the building market because people just don't like change. Simple as that. I think developers don't like change. And how does that? How do you see that in your experience, or how do you see that in America?
I would say, well, I mean, this is kind of one of the reasons that I wanted to propose a rethinking of how we talk about certain things. Rather than talking about affordable housing, let's talk about housing that's affordable. Rather than talking about energy positive housing, let's talk about housing that's energy positive. Rather than talk about modular housing, let's talk about housing that's made through modular.
Yeah.
Because the issue is we think about modular housing and we think of trailer homes. Oh no, and we get nervous. We say, no. I don't want a trailer home. But modular housing is not that. It's just made in bigger chunks somewhere else and delivered. And in fact, the quality's better and the cost is less. I mean, we would have saved about 20% of construction if we were able to implement modular housing. So for the city of Boston, the reason we weren't able to do that was basically because of unions and because the city of Boston was concerned about local labor. So this was entirely built by people that lived, if they weren't in Boston, they were in one of the adjoining neighborhoods, which is a concern when you're a municipality and you're giving away land. I mean, that I think that's a real issue. But if you're thinking of this on scale and you build a modular factory just outside of Boston to do this 40 or 100 times, then there's a lot of possibility there. But so it's one of those tricky things that it's a perception of what it is versus truly understanding what modular means. Modular just means building it in bigger chunks. So what I find that I can get across more easily is panelized construction, where you have prefab panels. And
Yeah.
people tend to feel like that's okay. So you know, your truck drives up with a bunch of panels, and within a couple of days you set up the exterior envelope. But modular is one that there's definitely trouble wherever you go, particularly getting clients to buy into it. But we did a fully modular high school in Germany that we were able to build in like 6 weeks because we were trying to get it done for the school season. And it's amazing actually with modular, you can put, you know, it doesn't mean that all your spaces are, you know, 15 feet by 30 feet. You can actually get big, huge lobbies. It's just put together with smaller pieces, or big pieces, but smaller pieces in the room.
Yeah, exactly. And I think the quality speaks for itself. I mean, why not systemize building more basically and do it in controlled environments? And prefabricated elements are something that's becoming a lot more popular here, but it's really, yeah, I guess, yeah, maybe I'm not framing it properly. That, yeah, when like the housing that we're doing is a relatively large scale, so I think the developers are kind of scared of this risk, despite the kind of increased quality and reduced cost. But I think it's something that's kind of slowly coming in to play. There's some great examples of modular housing in the Netherlands at the moment. But yeah, no, I really I like how you frame it as kind of panelized, like kind of, I think a lot of yeah, no, I think it's a great approach to kind of convincing clients and things. But did you find much other resistance to kind of different techniques here? I guess in a way you kind of kept the techniques relatively simple, which probably avoided the client having any kind of fear.
Well, I mean, the other big fear is the fear of when you show a list like this, developers are like, oh man, that looks expensive. And that's one that it takes a lot of convincing to show them that you can build it where you have, maybe the investment cost is a bit bigger, and typically it would be. This was a kind of an exceptional case where we got it on market. But if you look at it over 5 or 10 years, you'll find, you know, when your monthly operational costs are basically zero, that's pretty, you know, attractive. And that's where, I mean, that's actually, this is what's kind of funny is that the real estate agent initially tried to sell the unit. Here was the opening sentence that the real estate agent said when they first put it. They said, new construction architectural masterpiece, E-positive, net zero free living with double air filtration systems. Like that was like the most boring real estate start. It's like people don't really care. I mean, when you're buying a house, you don't care if you have, you know, double air filtration, right? I mean, that's like the starter. You want to know like what's the quality, you know, how many bedrooms, how many bathrooms, what's the quality, how is it, what are the qualities? But if this is where if we keep focusing on the technical, we lose the sales of the fact that let's make amazing buildings, let's make an amazing house.
Yeah,
and we can get those other things to work in there and make it work. And it can actually be so it's actually much more attractive if you told somebody like you're not going to have any operational costs ever because it's all the sun will do it for you. That's like, wait, what'd you say? I mean, that'll get people's attention. But
Wyly,
yeah.
Excuse me, Colin. These were to be sold individually. And, you know, when you started the conversation, I thought these might be rental units. And so often when I think of quote unquote, the sad term affordable housing, I think of rental units. And could you do something like this for a rental market also?
Honestly, it would probably be easier to do for a rental market because you have, the developer would have that monthly, it's really about monthly income versus costs. And I would think that, you know, you'd have to run through the pro forma, but it would definitely be, I think you could get the monthly cost to balance out easier than the overall costs. I mean, the risk to this one, there's one unit that's affordable, so it's only 25%. It is only one unit, so you know because it's only 4 units, and affordability to own is very different from affordable to rent. But in Boston, there's a big push for this, you know, ownership, affordability ownership, And so that's why that was the emphasis here. But that's the beauty of anything that you're building where the energy costs or the operational costs are very low, is your monthly payments are also very low. So I think that would actually lend itself to a rental market even better, particularly because the developer or the manager of that is really thinking about the 10-year or the 20-year, as opposed to a developer that's trying to sell it is often just trying to flip it, and all they want to think about is their profit immediately. And they're not thinking about the 10-year as much. I mean, now they have to sell that idea of 10-year, savings, and rather than hold it themselves.
Wyly, I absolutely love this. Love it, what it looks like, I love the building performance. I know that the building envelope is the key to being net zero or net positive. I'm curious about, I don't understand how you said that you did double 2x4s with a 2x10 sole plate, whatever, and that was cheaper than 2x6.
Yeah, because your 2x4, like 2x4s themselves cost less than 2x6s.
Right.
You do let me see if I can annotate on here to draw you a quick detail. Where's the annotate button? Oh, did I don't know if I can annotate. But essentially, rather than you doing a 2x6 every 12-inch or 16-inch on center,
right,
2x4, and you stagger them, so one's outside, one's inside on a 2x10. So you're actually using less material, less wood, and then you fill it in with insulation. Okay, the insulation does cost a little bit more than.
Okay, it's staggered 2x4s. Got it.
But so it's a principle of what's called advanced, advanced framing systems, where it's really these kind of newer ways of really thinking about how to be very efficient with your stick framing. And
okay.
Then what's great about that staggered stud is you have continuous insulation. So you can get that R value that's much higher with actually using less wood material than a conventional 2x6 frame construction.
What I'm wondering, did you had the concrete foundation, did you look at ICF? Did you look at SIP panels instead of the staggered 2x4s?
Absolutely, yeah, we looked at all those. And like I said, the city of Boston nixed any prefabrication for SIPs, for example, because that would have required, some factory in New Hampshire would have had gotten the money for building it, and they wanted local labor. So, there's ups for innovation in
okay.
that. So we had to do it on-site construction. ICF is a great one. It's funny though, ICF, I mean, I was building with ICF I got an innovation award for ICF back in 2004. And then when we actually proposed this in ICF as well, and they were like, oh, this is so innovative. And I was like, I've been doing this for 15 years, it's not innovative anymore. But the problem is contractors get nervous about ICF because they're not familiar with it. And right now we're in a market in Boston where you actually have to pay contractors to show up to give you a bid because there's so much work. And so anything that wasn't like conventional concrete, they're like, oh yeah, we're just going to cost 30% more just because, and although I've actually built ICF I one time did it and I hired a bunch of art students and we built it at about 40% less cost than conventional, with unskilled, I mean, they're art students, they're sculptors, they had building skills. But ICF is an amazing way to reduce costs, but it's that bid market that you have to convince a contractor who may or may not have used it before that it's actually much easier to deal with than conventional concrete.
Yeah, great stuff. Thank you.
Hey, Wyly, we do have a question from Mary, and she's asking, is this something that could be used for subsidized housing or housing for homeless?
Really, at the end of the day, I would say absolutely. And I would suggest, I mean, my belief is that anytime we build, again, the modifiers, anytime we build any housing for anybody, energy positive should be the baseline standard. Because truly, whether it's government subsidized or whoever it's for, it's cheaper in the end to do this over the long term. Particularly if you think about someone who you're going to put in there and you whether you're propping them up or giving them a chance or how much they're paying for it. The fact that your monthly operational costs are zero, or you pay for internet, we'll give you that, but really makes it in the long term much more manageable because you get everything up front worked out. And I think, this is where it's all about the cleverness of design. You can solve some of these problems so much easier from the design end but like you said, a lot of the problems we're running into, we could have saved 20% if we went modular. We could have saved another, 10% if we did ICF. The technology's out there, the techniques are out there, but it's the politics that actually tend to make it more complicated. So one of the issues of anything that's, whether it's, again, what were the two words you used? You said subsidized housing, or, I mean, this is technically subsidized. The government does put some money because there's an affordable unit. Or you said housing for the homeless. There's the politics of where the grant money comes from. So you'll get grant money from, whether it's from HUD or it's state funding, and there's going to be a bunch of caveats on there. And so it's balancing, and this is not my area of expertise. I mean, there's CDCs and developers that know this much better than I do. But I find the politics is much harder to navigate than the design and the construction. I mean, we have the knowledge and the ability to do this. Actually, getting this energy positive was the easy part. I mean, here's the other funny thing. I mean, I know I'm talking to USGBC. The biggest cost that we had above the normal cost was getting the LEED Platinum certification. I mean, the amount of additional hours we had, we could build the thing and make that cheaper, but to get the LEED Platinum, we had to go through, so many weeks of administrative duties. And at the end of the day, is the LEED Platinum making this building any better? No, it makes it a little bit more sales worthy, but it's really, that's just a real estate sales thing, but it's not a quality of the building thing.
And before we go, because I think I'm interested in this question, and I think probably other people would be as well. You've talked about the design of it being net zero energy, or net positive. But when was this actually finished? And then have you heard of any sort of results about what's actually being used? And then a question came in. Is there energy storage, or does the energy positive rely on net metering?
Okay, so the answer is like yes, yes, and yes to all that. So we have what's it called? It's the utility tracking just got installed last month. So now we're tracking it. This was just finished, and it's true. It's all done off energy modeling, and we were well over the amount required. But that's part of the energy savings as well, is actually having smart building controls with advanced minute-to-minute utility tracking. So the homeowner themselves can respond almost in the minute-to-minute to the situation, and the building will regulate itself. It will actually start to learn how you can set it to your cell phone that when you walk in the building, it knows where you are. It knows if you're on your way. I mean, it's kind of scary if you think about it on one level, but where the building will know to cool off during the day when you're not there, or to warm up, or to respond to the way you use it. And there's a lot of savings in that, or shut off lights when no one's clearly around. And so there is definitely utility tracking in there, and there's those building controls that you can actually tune it to your level of comfort, and you can see the energy results from it. So that's something we're doing. We do have storage in there as well. And the other one that's actually interesting is is the car ports. So that actually your house is also cutting your commuting costs suddenly, because if you have an electric car, you plug it in and your solar array is now charged. So that's another storage aspect. And but it is connected to the network as well. So if there is a problem, it will, you'll always have the possibility of taking power off the grid. And that's actually, a lot of it is once the storage is filled and your car is filled and everything's filled, it will send energy to the grid as well.
So Wyly, all of this was planned and thought about and built into the design. So the whole idea, if you put solar panels on an existing home, you can't switch back and forth between I'm going to run on my solar, I'm going to run on the grid. So if the grid goes down, your house has no energy. But this has all been thought about and wired in advance. So if the grid goes down, this house runs on its own totally, and that switching back and forth between the grid and the solar panel creation of energy is just automatic. The homeowner doesn't have to think about it.
That's correct. There are ways to do that for retrofits. It's just it requires a more technical system where you have a bus that's monitoring where the power is coming from, which is expensive. So it's definitely much cheaper to do this up front than it is as a retrofit. But yes, if the grid goes down, if Dorchester has a blackout, this person still has however much battery power they've built up that they can run off of. I mean,
Awesome.
what would be devastating is if they took out the low energy dryer and put in a conventional dryer and then dried their clothes 10 times a day, yeah, then we're going to run out of energy. we're going to be energy negative at that point.
Well, I know we are over time, but I really do like this question from Ralph of pursuing LEED certification. How did that help like guide your team accomplish like this high performing building? Or did it, I guess?
So, I talked about my three kind of pillars of design and environmental sustainability. I worked in Germany for 10 to 12 years. So it's kind of funny when I came here when I came back to the US in 2016, and suddenly people were like, oh, we want to build Passive House. Passive House was already passé in Germany at that was like, 10 years old. And I was like, oh yeah, we used to do those too, but now we're so far. So these principles of sustainability and of low energy are really fundamental to the way I design. And so, LEED, and I forget the European equivalent. There's another one. It has another acronym that I can't think of. We offer these services, but they're not really the guiding forces for us. And so we were able. And actually, this was the first time I had done LEED, because we've done the European equivalent, and which is probably why we had this big we had to figure out the politics and the admin of it and getting it verified and all that. But I think our way of thinking is really, I would say, holistically, and much of it is how you orient it on the site and how you deal with stormwater management. And a lot of, we all know a lot of LEED is just where is your site? And so I don't think it really helped us too much for this particular project. I'm sure it's helpful in a lot of projects, but we basically were just checking off things that we had already, kind of put in place.
Okay, and very last question, you guys. Wyly, what is your perspective on how this affects property values?
It's a little outside my area of expertise, but I think it will only increase the value. I really think this idea that your monthly cost is very low. When you're building a building, there's so much that you're paying for already. And so even if you just had to add a little, or if you can be clever and increase the design costs a little bit, but actually decrease your construction costs, it's really about, there's clever ways to solve all these problems that don't necessarily cost more if you really look at the context and look at the specifics of where you are and what the conditions are. And so I think if we going back to my whole kind of thesis, if we shift back to the idea of like, what is quality living spaces? What is quality of housing? Then when you walk into these spaces, people are always like, wow. And that wow factor is value. There's other factors of neighborhood and these, so you can't just always think of it, but really having amazing living spaces where people can say like, oh yeah, I want to live there. Oh wait, this is an affordable unit? Like that's always like surprising. So I think and what actually happened is the market in Boston spiked, this summer, and these were the market units were sold much more. The developer made much more money than they had on their pro forma. So it clearly worked.
Yeah, and moreover, I think it's fascinating how you kind of use these balconies the stoop, the terrace, to kind of like interact with the surroundings. I think that adds a lot of value that the real estate agents can't really put a price on per se. So that wasn't a question, because I had our last question, but I love that about the project. And I love your anecdote about the guys beeping their horn. But really, I think it's super effective, and just the way it fits in with its surroundings with these kind of materials is really, really amazing, I think.
Well, what an interesting anecdote about the balconies is that every official at the city of Boston, every time they look at our drawings, would say like, maybe we should tune the colors down a little bit. And I finally told them at one point, I was like, every time you say that, I'm going to turn up the saturation on the colors. And as soon as I presented to the city, so this neighborhood is like a lot of Caribbean immigrants, a lot of Haitians, a lot of Jamaicans, Dominican Republic, and their houses are colorful. And the community was like, wow. And I remember this little kid who's like, people are going to be like, yeah, I live in the red apartment, or I live in the blue apartment. And the community was so overjoyed to like have some color. And so
exactly, yeah. I remember it was like, I think it was like a day or two before the competition deadline that you were like, like, this needs something, like, what can we do? And you're like, let's add some color. So
Needs a little-
it paid off. It paid off.
Yeah, yeah.
Beautiful. No, I love it.
Well, just to kind of wrap it up, I know that we are over time and we want to try to make these quick, but I want to thank Wyly Brown for joining us today. It was a really great presentation, and I think that we had some really great discussion and questions that did come up about that. Before everyone goes, I did want to remind everyone to register for our next evening program, which will cover our green building showcase. And we're going to be featuring a lot of buildings. And so if you liked this coffee break, you're going to love the green building showcase. So don't forget to register for that event. It is going to be on May 4th. No, sorry. May 11th, and it'll start at 5:30. So please join us for that. And that's it. Thanks.
Thank you, guys. It was a great conversation.
Thanks, everybody.
Take care. Thanks so much.
Bye. Thank you, guys. Great to see everybody. Have a great weekend. Thanks, Mr. Brown.
Call me Wyly, please.
Wyly, sorry. Wyly, yes.
Thank
Thank you
you.
so much.